Do a review in the Kutas Sichas in Chelek Chov, volume 20. This is the last Sicha, the third Sicha for the portion of Vayechi, and the last Sicha of volume 20. And the Rebbe explains Arashi in the end of the Chumash Bereishis in Vayechi, in the end of the Parsha. And the Rebbe, the Pasuk, talks about how Yosef lived until that his grandchildren and also the grandchildren's children, the Bnei Mochir, Menashe had a son Mochir, and the children of Mochir, the were also born. It says Al Birki Yosef. What exactly the Birki Yosef means? So Rashi is going to bring down from the Rebbe is going to bring down from the Rashi, and there's another place also, Birkei in the Chumash. The Rebbe is going to compare it and going to ask the question why Rashi needs it to explain it here, not there. He brings down the Taich of Yonis Menuziel. Birkei Yosef means that he actually did the circumcision. The Rebbe bring out in Halacha an issue, when does the Nefesh HaKedusha, the Alter Rebbe says that it enters by 8 days. As we will see, we'll go step by step. Aleph. The Siyum HaSedra, in the end of the Sedra, stellt sich Rashi auf Gam Bnei Mochir Gomer Yudu. Also, the sons of Mochir, who was the son of Menashe, they too were born al Birkei Yosef, on the knees of Yosef. So what does it mean they were born on the knees of Yosef, that the great-grandchildren were born on the knees of Yosef? So Rashi says like the Targum, and Rashi Taiches brings down the Targum. It says, Godlon bein Birkov. He raised them between his knees. Godlon. He raised them in Birkov. So what is Rashi explaining over here? The Pashtus Lerentmen word Yuldu, they weren't born on Yosef's knees. That doesn't make sense. How would they be born on Yosef's knees? So we learn that Rashi is coming to tell us over here that they were raised. Birkei Yosef doesn't mean that they were born on his knees, but they were raised with them. Pashtus Lerentmen. As by Rashi Nishver der Loshen, that Rashi has difficulty with the language of the Pasuk, Yuldu al Birkei Yosef, that the sons of Machir were also born on the knees of Yosef. Wie kann man sagen, als Bnei Machir seine geboren al Birkei Yosef? How could you say that the sons of Machir were born on the knees of Yosef? The Riber is Rashi Mefarish. The Rashi explains, as Kavonas HaKosov is nicht as they seinen geboren geworden al Birkei Yosef. It's not that they were born on the lap, on the knees of Yosef, nor as Godlam ben Birkov. He raised them between his knees, but not that they were born there, but they were raised. They were raised between his knees. But this is still not exactly clear what the taich of the posik of Yuldu al Birkei Yosef. What is the Yuldu? Does Yuldu, as the Even Ezra says, mean in this posik raised? So Yuldu would mean raised, as if it says Gudlu al Birkei Yosef. That's one way of saying it. That's the Even Ezra. Or actually, Yuldu means they were born and then they were raised al Birkei Yosef. Let's see inside. But dafür verstehen those Gufa as their posik meint Godlon Chulu, that it means Godlon can man lernen if zwei fanim. We can interpret this in two ways. Aleph wie der Even Ezra learned, as the Even Ezra learns, as der Taich von Yuldu do is Godlu. That here the word Yuldu even though normally it means born, but here it means raised. They were raised al birkei Yosef. But the other way, the Targum says no. Yuldu means born like always. We're just adding Yuldu, and then they were raised, something missing in the pasuk al birkei Yosef. Based with the Targum zogt oif Yuldu al birkei Yosef. How does the Targum say? It says Isyalidu, they were born. The Rabbi Yosef, and Yosef raised them. Was from them is moving. So this we understand. As Rabbi Yosef, that Yosef raised them, is Shaykh und is der Obteich, that is belongs and translate nicht for Yuldu. It's not Yuldu doesn't mean. Is Yalidu means born. The Targum says. The Rabbi Yosef is nicht is und is der Obteich nicht von Yuldu, nor von Al Birke Yosef. That Al Birke Yosef means that they were raised Al Birke Yosef. So Yuldu means born normally, as the normal touch. Al Birke Yosef means they were raised on the Birke Yosef. And there's like missing in the pasuk over here. And the pshat is, Ubnei Mochir, the sons of Mochir, Yuldu, they were born. Und danach, uh, and danach, Al Birke Yosef, Yuldu, first Yuldu, und danach Vayiyu al Birke Yosef, and then they were on the Birke Yosef, means that what the Rabbi Yosef, that Yosef raised them, Eretz Makatlik, he raised them. So Yuldu remains born, and then it's like missing in the pasuk that they were born and raised by Yosef. Urashi nimmt on, nicht wie der Rebbe Ezer, nor wer sagt befehlisch. Rashi learns not like the Eben Ezra, but Rashi says befehlisch kitargumoi. That meaning over here, it's like the Targum, that it's not the changes the translation of the word Yuldu, it's just changes al Birkei Yosef. They were raised by Yosef. Under Far, and because Rashi learns like the Targum, is there nit maitik in them dibra maischel them word Yuldu. That's why in the quote from the pasuk he doesn't bring out the word Yuldu because we're not explaining Yuldu. Well, it is nor mefarish the Berter al Birkei Yosef. He only brings down the words of Birkei Yosef because that's what he's explaining. Rashi is only explaining what the meaning of al Birkei Yosef means, that Yosef raised them, but he doesn't change the word Yuldu, so Rashi doesn't quote it from the pasuk. Beis, and also Rashi zogt Godlon, that he raised them. Nit Gudlu, not they were raised as the pasuk is masim to Yuldu. If Rashi would be translating the word Yuldu, so Rashi said Gudlu. But this is not Yuldu. Yuldu is born, we know. But then Godlon, al Birkei, they were raised by Yosef. Okay, so we need to understand, why does Rashi Taka choose to learn like the Targum and not like the Eben Ezra would seem more bipshat, that Yuldu means born. That over here in this case, that Yuldu is not missing in the pasuk. Yuldu means raised. Al Birkei. So the Rebbe will say, because we find the context, Yuldu doesn't necessarily mean to be physically born. It could be raised, as the Rebbe brings by Moshe. It says that he was the father of the children because he told them Torah is Tamua. So why does Rashi choose to learn like the Targum, and there's words missing in the pasuk is Yaldu, and then he raised them, and not translate that Yuldu means like the Ibn Ezra says, Gudlu over here it means they were raised. Is Tabua. Pavos lernt Rashi kitargumai. Why does Rashi learn as the Targum? Was lifizem musman dechik zayin. So if we learn like the Targum, we have to squeeze in as their posik is ki'ilu v'amikro kotzer, that this posik is as if a short verse. Und lernt nicht as Yuldu do mein Gudlo. So why does Rashi not learn That Yuld over here means they were raised. Ah, you're gonna tell me because Yildu means born, not raised. No, we find we can't answer. You can't say that the reason Rashi doesn't like to translate Yildu means raised. As al derech pshat is schwer zu lernen, as Yildu mean gudlu. That according to the simple meaning, it's difficult to interpret, to learn. That Yildu means raised, because Yulda means born. But Megifinta as Rashi Alain, Rashi himself in Parshat Bamidbar later on, but Rashi in Parshat Bamidbar is Mefarish. Ve'ela told this Aaron and Moshe. These are the children of Aaron and Moshe. Even though the pasuk only talks about the children of Aaron, not Moshe, Venikru told this Moshe, Lefish Lamdun Torah. Rashi says they're called also told this Moshe because Moshe told them Torah. Shekol Amalamed has been Chavedet Torah. Anyone who teaches the son of his fellow Torah, Malolavakosu Kilu Yelode, the Torah counts if he gave birth. So Moshe Rabbeinu was also the father, was also Torahless. So if we can see that they can be called the Torahs, not physical. They were born not from Moshe, were born from Aaron, and yet we call them Toldis. Zetman. So what do you see? As Pshat can lay the main and London Torah. They're also according to the Pshat, even though it says he gave birth to them, it means he taught them Torah, which is lay the Beruchnis. He gave birth to them spiritually. Al achas kama v'kamo, and how much more so benidin dan in our case. As Megadol given. Over here, he raised them. He didn't only teach them Torah. So for raising them, did not be negay Torah in prat, not just Torah and Torah. He raised them in general. Not in all protim for gittel bonim, but in all details as you raise children. So we can certainly say Yuldu means they raised them. Why does Rashi have to say it means literally born and then to add and say, and then Yosef raised them al Birkov as he raised them? So the Rebbe says because the word birkai, al birkai, is mentioned before in the pasuk when Rachel says that he should take Yaakov should marry her maidservant, marry Bilhah, and she will give birth al birkai. So let's see what Rashi teaches of dir al birkai. Over there al birkai, we can't say over there that Taled she will raise al birkai. So therefore, in our pasuk, which it says that al birkei Yosef, Yuldu al birkei Yosef, we can't touch it. That means raise. Let's look inside. The Biur was that base. In Parshas Vayechi state, the portion of Vayechi it states, "Vatoino Rachel Gomer bo e leho." Be intimate with her with Bilhah, v'teiled, and she will give birth. Al birkai, touched Rashi. So Rashi touched there. What does it mean? She will give birth. Bilhah will be give birth. Al birkai can say teiled that Rivka will raise. Touched Rashi al birkai kitargomai. Rashi says, what does it mean al birkai? Va'ano arbi. She will give birth and I will raise. Was dort kemenit lernen. Over there, you can't interpret, you can't learn as the Taichfun v'teled, that v'teled means is va'ano arbi. That I will v'teled, and she will give her. So you can't say v'teled and I will raise. V'teled says that she will. You can't say va'ano arbi. She wants to say that she's going to raise the child that Bilhah is going to give birth to. Weil der Wort v'teled, sie wird geboren, is can sich doch nicht beziehen zu Rachel. This cannot go on the Rachel. It's v'teled, and she, meaning Bilhah will give birth and I will raise. You can't see and she, because she is the one that is speaking, so it must be that she's talking. That v'teled means that Bila will give birth, and Ano Arbi I will raise. Muss man sagen, als der Ingen von Vano Arbi. So therefore, this concept I will raise is in the Werter al Birkai. But in the words al Birkai itself means on my knees means that I will raise. Parzich. Das heißt, therefore, v'teled mainly the kipshuti. Birth means she'll give birth. Literally. The Targum teach dort, as the Targum says, v'teled v'talid. She'll give birth. That's the uncle, is the Targum of v'teled is v'talid. Bilavet geboren akin. Was wird sein? Al birkai, be al birkai, and no arbe, and I will raise. Since over there the pshat is she will give birth and I will raise, over here where it says you'll do. Bald as Parshasenu steht an ähnlicher Loschen. It's a similar Loschen. You'll do al birkai. Hot nit kein Ort zu sagen, then it doesn't really fit to say. As do soll wie Rabbi Yosef sein der Teich that over here that Yosef will raise should be the translation nit von al birkei Yosef allein, that just the word birkei Yosef means I will raise, nor from what you'll do. Over there, birkei means raise alone. So here we're not going to say that you'll do means that, and al birkei itself means that. The Farzok Rashi as Dovi in Parshas Vayechi that here, just like in the portion of Vayechi, is the Taich for Yuldu Kipshutei. It means literally. Unal Birke Yosef, Yuldu means born. Now Birke Yosef is the Katargumei, and that he will raise them. But it doesn't really fit to change around from what we just had the language by Yuldu. But V'teled al birkai, over there you can't say v'teled means raised. So over here Yud is also not raised, means literally pshutei. Al birkai is like over there. Birkai means I will raise, and here it means that Yosef raised. So we know why Rashi has to touch, but we have to understand Rashi himself, several questions in the language of Rashi. First of all, Rashi says what it brings the language of the Targum. It doesn't just bring down the Targum. Rashi usually says Ketargume. Number one, we need to understand the length in the Rashi's commentary here. Aleph. Number one, Darkei shel Rashi b'Pirushei Do. Aleph. Darkei shel Rashi b'Kama Mekoyim sees. Rashi's style in many places, but Nerzokt ki Targum, when he says like the Targum, but nuken terzich der mit, he satisfied just saying Titkar Targumai, and he doesn't say what the Targum says. He relies that you alone will gonna look it up in the Targum. It doesn't tell you what the Targum says. And even when he does quote the language of the Targum, is a bederech klal usually nit mefarish dem Targum. He doesn't interpret, explain what the Targum means. As you see in Rashi's commentary, if al birka in Parshas Vayechi, he quotes the Targum, but he doesn't say what ano arbi means, that he's going to raise them. He just says, yeah, he brings down what the Targum says, but he doesn't translate it. Isn't it move on? So we don't understand. Rashi. So how come Rashi needs to be Rashi do be parseinu opteichen den Pirush HaTargum in Loshen HaKodesh? Why does he need to translate the Targum in Loshen Kodesh, Godlon Chulu, that he raised? V'oid, if you say that we don't know Arabic what it means, that Rashi needs to explain it, why didn't Rashi explain it over there in I'll be before? If the Targum's interpretation requires a translation Loshen Kodesh, but as Rashi gedacht on free in Parshas Vayechi, Rashi should have translated Parshas Vayechi when he says Al Birkai, Ano Arbi, Rashi should have said Ano Arbi means Ano Agadol or something. Why doesn't Rashi say it over there and just says it over here? So the Rebbe wants to know, why does Rashi have to say what the Targum, and without just the Targum, and even if he does, and then he brings down the interpretation in Lashon Kodesh what the Aramaic Targum means. Why doesn't he do it over there before if it's necessary? Uh, and then why does Rashi have to continue say in between Birkov, and that's a change? The two things. It changes also. Rashi should have said, "Gadlan Arabi," that Godlan, that Yosef Godlan. Why does he have to say Ben Birko? Base, I feel him as all gefit nahas border. Pavos Rashi that in the board Rabbi Godlan. Even if you're going to find some sort of an explanation why Rashi needs to translate the word Viravi that he raised them, is not move on. It's not understood. So was darfer der zu mightig sein. So why does he also have to quote from the Zugeben de Werte Ben Birkov between his knees? What Ravi, God, what does Rashi have to say? Rashi is to say that he will raise them. Should say, but nor. Uh, um, so why does he say add also Ben Birkov? And number three, this actually the Rebbe says makes it a problem. The Tmi in them is noch starker. The surprise becomes even greater by Rashi using the Ben Birkov. The Isofa from Ben Birkov is Lachayri in Stira to Targumai. Saying in between his knees seems to be contradictory to the Targumai. The Targum says Al, not Ben. Beim Aufdeutschen al Birke Yosef, sagt nicht der Targum, when he translates the Birke Yosef, the Targum doesn't say Rabbi Yosef al Ruch. Sagt nicht der Targum Rabbi Yosef al Ruchuve. On his knees, Kuyetsubai. Doesn't say that. Therefore is mashma, as Leuten Targum is the Pirush von Al Birkai, nit kipshutei b'movan gashmi. So that means that according to the Targum, Al Birkai does not mean knees, not rechuvi, not the knees in Targum. Nit kipshutei b'movan gashmi, which means it doesn't mean literally on knees. No, das ist ein Ausdruck, was hat bei Taita, so das sehen wir This is just a expression that means, that has the meaning that that he raised them. So al birkai means raising children, but not physically birkai. And Rashi adds, kommt euch as mitzulegen de Werte bein birkov. Rashi adds bein birkov. Was the suffer from Loshen HaTargum, because you're adding to the language of the Targum, is madgish, that emphasizes as the Godlam is given bein birkov, that it was in between these. Is the Pirush Rashi Kishitose. So when Rashi learns in which is Kipshute, Rashi style is Shute, Nit Kitarguma, it's not like Targum says that I will raise them. That's all what it means. Al Birki Yosef means that he raised them. Uh, and Rashi adds Ben Birkov. So when Rashi adds Ben Birkov, he means to say that it's not like the Targum says that just Ben Birkov means raise them, but it means physically. So this is not Kitargume. So he says Kitargume, and then he really is saying not like the Targum. Rashtar Kitargume. The Targum says, according to the Targum, it means raising. Al Birke doesn't mean physically. And Rashi adds to the Lashon Birke means physically. But maybe the Rebbe says Rashi is coming to clarify the Targum. That even though the Targum says raising, it doesn't say Birkoi, but since physically When you raise a child, you hold him a lot of times on your lap, on the birkov, on your knees. So therefore, it's called birkov. Rashi is clarifying that also according to the Targum, which means raising, it still has to do with physically the birkov. The Chayre you can't answer. It seems like you could answer. As das Gufish Rashi oisen zu bewonnen, and this itself Rashi is trying to answer. As euch leut Targumoi is der Teich von Albirke Yosef Kipshute. That even according to the Targum, the translation of Albirke Yosef means also literally, means on the knees. Ubehasem Ravi, and that fits with the Targum says raising, because for Mishas men is Magad Lakin, the Halpanim ofters Al Birko, because when you are raising a child, you hold them often on the knees. As we see in reality. So that's why maybe Rashi is coming to say Ben Birkov that you're raising, but you raise Ben Birkov. That's the way you hold it. The mit volt euch gewen recht. And this would also explain why Rashi changes to Ben Birkov. Because Rashi is Meshana for Loshen HaKos. If he changes the posting, says Al Birke Yosef. And Rashi says, Rashi changes, says Ben Birkov. Weil Megadol sein a Kind nimmt rein, when you're raising a child, it includes nicht nur dem Gil, wenn halt him al Birkov, not only the child when you hold him on your knees, noch euch später, you raise the child even later, und am mehr längere Zeit, when it is Ben Birkov, when it's between your knees, and you hold the child. So not only on the knees, so this would include more, and that's what Rashi changes it from the Pasuk al Birkai, and says Ben Birkov. Okay, so the Rebbe explains maybe this is what Rashi is coming to tell her, but we still have the problem. If this is Rashi's intending, how come Rashi didn't bother explaining it by Al Birkai by Rochel? Es bleibt aber nicht verstanden, genau, as mentioned before. Ob Rashi darf bewornen as Aleph. The Rashi wants to caution us and explain that also that we should still translate birka physically. Un beis as al domain bain, and it says al means in between. But as Rashi gedarf ton frir in Parshas Vayechi, in which it says al birkai, that Rachel said al birkai, Rashi should have said over there that it means Ben Birkov, to tell us that it means the Birkov Mamish and it means Bain. And both the Birkov and Bain Birkov. Only there's doing Parshas Vayechi, and not to wait till the portion of Vayechi. So the Rebbe basically is asking the lengthy explanation, the Rashi's length for the Targumai. And the Rebbe, even if the way the Rebbe suggests that maybe Rashi is trying to tell us that even the Targum means pshutish also that it means birkov mamish, because you raising a child has to do with the knees, with the lap and with the knees. But this is Rashi should explain this. If that's what Rashi wants, Rashi should have explained this earlier by the Parshas Vayechi by Rachel saying that Bila should give al birkai, and therefore it seems like Rashi means something else. So while the Rebbe explained that first ois that Gudlu here means that Yuldu means born, literally born, physically born, and the Rebbe proves that from Vayetzeh, from Rachel with Bila. But the question is, why is Rashi going through the lengthy explanation here and doesn't say anything in Parshas Vayetzeh by Bila, by Rachel and Bila? Is Dalet. So the Rebbe now explains that there would be a possibility to translate Al Yulda Birku Yosef. They were born, and Yosef was the Sandik. They were literally Al Birku Yosef. then that explains why we're talking about here the birth. If we're just talking about Yosef raised them, um, why do we mention also birth? Let's look inside. And Rashi is coming to reject that interpretation. And it says Ketargumai, not like the Targum Yenis and Ben Uziel. Dalav, the Bir Bazeh, Vitzugem the Werter, Godlan Ben Birkov. When Rashi adds the words that he raised them Ben Birkov, will Rashi shelu sein dem Pirush von Targum Yonason. Rashi is coming to reject the interpretation of Targum Yonason. He teaches Kadis Yaldu, Yuldu when they were born. Gazirinun Yosef. Yosef made the bris, was the Sandeka the bris, Leuten Obteich. According to the interpretation, Azer bris mila is given al Birke Yosef. That the bris was on the lap of Yosef. Yosef actually held him. And he's given Zer Sandek. He was the Sandek. Gazirinun, I did the bris. The Lechera had their Pirush an Ortech the Chapshat. Would seem that this interpretation is also, according to Pshat, makes sense. While a lot of things fall into place. If we say Abirki Yosef, that Yosef did the Sandik, did the bris. If he's there, the Werter Abirki Yosef Gitaish Kipshot Mamish, because according to this, the words Birki Yosef are translated literally, actually literally on his lap. He held them on his knees when they did the bris. Base. Another thing which fits very well. Der Wort Yuldu is glatiker them Pirush. Also, the first word of they were born is more smoother according to this interpretation that he did the bris, because that's the bris is close to the birth. That's what we're talking about, birth. But if he raised them, why do we talk about birth? Leuten Targum Onkelos kemen fragen. According to the Targum Onkelos, you can ask, wie passt zu der Monen der Inyan Haleda? How does it fit to mention here the birth, Yisalidu? Do is blois negei as Yosef at say Megadol given. Here it's only important that Yosef raised them. Al derech vi ba'afraim. Ba'afraim, not talking about over there by birth. Over there we're talking about he saw the Bnei Ephraim. Gam Bnei Shleshim. Was dort steht nicht, dass Yosef hat gesehen, wer seine geboren geworden, Le Ephraim Bnei Shleshim. It doesn't say that he saw that they were born, Esialidu. Pasuk says he saw Ephraim Bnei Shleshim, but it doesn't say that he saw them being born there. Nor Stama said it's a Gizen, that he was, they during that he has done, he saw to Ephraim also Bnei Shleshim. And here, why are we bringing in the Leda? But according to the Targum Yonason, it makes sense because the Bris, Birki Yosef, comes right after the Leda. Mashenk the Targum Yonason, was a Birki Yosef red wegen dem Zman Habris, is mer masim the word Yuldu, so it's more fitting the word Yuldu. While the Bris is called Bismichas to Zman HaLeda, because the Bris comes very close to the time of birth. So that would be another reason why the Targum Yonasan's interpretation bris would be good. Number one, it means birkai kipshuta on the lap. That was the bris. Number two, we understand why it's talking about yuldu, because this has to do with the birth. Gimel v'iker. And the main thing is, idea-wise, why would Yosef HaMishnah Melech raise his grandchildren? The children of Mochir were raised by Yosef. Why they didn't have anything else to do, Yosef, the Mishnah Lamelech? If we say that it means a Sandik, then it fits. He was the Sandik. But Gimel V'Ikeres is mer mistaber to learn. It is more logical to learn as Yosef is given their Sandik by Bnei Mochir, that he was the Sandik by the children of Mochir. Wie zu sagen then to say as Eindig a Mishnah Lamelech, that while he was second to the king, Medina, he was busy with running the country. As the Pasuk says, without Yosef, nobody can raise their hand or foot. He was in charge over everything. So we're saying, so he devoted himself to raise his grandchildren, great grandchildren, and their far, and therefore, because of all these three logical things that would be that it was Yosef was the Sandik. So Avapi as in Parsha Vayechi Taich Rashi, even though in the portion of Vayechi Rashi translates Birke Kitargume Vano Arbi, that Al Birke means I will raise. But when you can't meinen, as dort darf man teichen, one might think that here you should translate Yuldar Birke Yosef with the Pirshu Targum Yonason. And here you should say Yuldar Birke Yosef as the Targum Yonason, that he was the Sandik, the bris was done. For all of these three reasons that the Rebbe gave. First of all, Yulda means, Birke means literally on his knees. And Yuldu would also make sense because the bris takes place after they're born. That's what we're talking about, Yuldu. And also, how come Yosef was doing the raising of the children is not so logical as to say that he did the Sabbath. So, even though that over there Rashi Taich it means raise, but over here you could think maybe it means that he was the Sabbath. The to shows I know them Pirush. And in order to reject this interpretation, Rashi is not satisfied by saying Ketargume. Nor is Meisif Levayr them Teuchan HaPirush from Targume, but he adds and he explains the contents of the meaning of Targume. Godlon Chulu, he raised them. Lahad Gish, to emphasize, as der Hechrech zu Teichen Doke Targume, that what it forces us to translate like the Targum is nicht nur mitzad dem Targum and Taich from the Werter al Birki Yosef. It's not just because that fits the translation of Birki Yosef means that he raised them, as we learned before by Rochel and Bilha, that she raised them. Nor from them Teuchen HaKos of Kidl Kamon, but it's actually from the contents, from the meaning of the verse. That's what the Rashi is coming to say. Here, we'll see the difference between the way it's written, Take by Menashe, and the way it's written by Ephraim. The Pasuk says, Gam b'nei mochid ben Menashe, Isor Ephraim b'nei Shileshim, Gam b'nei mochid ben Menashe. In Pasuk steht, Vayar Yosef le'Ephraim b'nei Shileshim. So by Ephraim it says he saw the third generation of Ephraim. So he saw Ephraim's children and grandchildren. And then it says, Gam b'nei mochid ben Menashe. Also, the Shileshim of Menashe, which is b'nei mochid. So it says, Gam b'nei mochid ben Menashe el birki Yosef. And then was the pasuk so Gam b'nei mochid goyim. So why is the pasuk say also b'nei mochid? Is muchach as the rin likt achidish legabe vayar Yosef le'Ephraim b'nei Shileshim. So it's evident that we have to say that there's some sort of a novelty with regards to Vayar Yosef le'Ephraim b'nei Shileshim. The Torah says also the b'nei mochid ben Menashe. Isn't it Muva? So what is the Chidan? Those was Yosef had left to them b'nei Shileshim. For Ephraim, the fact that he lived to see the third generation, the great grandchildren of Ephraim, the grandchildren of Ephraim, his great grandchildren, from Ephraim and Weiss of Alengere Meshach Zman, that shows to a longer period of time, Vidos was b'nei mocher ben Menashe than geboren geworden b'chayiv, then that during his lifetime, b'nei mocher ben Menashe were born because Menashe was the older son, so they should be born earlier than Ephraim's kid. If he lived to Ephraim's kids, what's the Chiddush of saying? Also the grandchildren of Menashe, he had a bigger chance to see the grandchildren of Menashe than Ephraim. Weil Aleph, ze seine blois bonim shniim. Over here, he's not talking about the so by Ephraim, it says it's sort of b'nei Shileshim, which means that was his third generation. So that was only not Ephraim's third generation, that was his third generation, that he saw Bnei Shileshim, which means third generation. That would mean he saw uh, the second generation, which means he saw Ephraim's kids. Based from Menashe was is given was is given älter von Ephraim. I have to correct myself. When the pasuk says Vayar Yosef leEphraim b'nei Shileshim, that means Ephraim's third generations, Ephraim's son, Ephraim's grandson, and Ephraim's great grandson. So that means he saw Ephraim's third generation, and by Menashe, it says that he saw the children of Menashe, not the great grandchildren of Menashe. So, therefore, the question is, why is the fact that he's saying that he saw Gam Bnei Moch ben Menashe as Gam also? So, first of all, Aleph, Zay, Zayin, Blois, Bonim, Shneim. They are only two generations after Menashe. Menashe. Then you have the one is Mochir. That's one level, one generation. And Bnei Mochir. So that's a second generation. So Menashe's, he only saw two generations of Menashe. Menashe's son Mochir and Menashe and Mochir's children. So that's two. But by Ephraim, he saw Bnei Shileshim, meaning Ephraim's third generation. So he saw much. It seems much more by Ephraim and then by sort of third generation of Ephraim, but by Menashe only sort of second generation. So why are we saying also Mochi ben Menashe? Why is that also? And Beis, and number two for Menashe was he's given Elta from Ephraim, and Menashe was older, so it wouldn't be such a. He should see more of Menashe than of Ephraim. So why is the Torah say Gam also b'nei Mocha ben Menashe? What's the chiddush over here? But according to the Onkelos, it's understood because by Ephraim he just saw them. Over here he raised them, which means he lived for a long period with them. Leutargen Onkelos aber is as verstanding, but according to the Onkelos Targum, it's understood. The Bnei Shileshim leEphraim had Yosef Blois Gizen. He would only see them when they were just very little. Mashenkin the Bnei Mocher ben Menashe is given the Chiddush. Mocher Menashe, the Chiddush was as Yosef had said Magadol given that he raised them. But thus made bis to an eltern gil, that means that he saw them when they were in an older age. Uh, so that's why Rashi adds to the pasuk that Godlom, that this was something which he raised them until a older age. It wasn't just when they were babies, because otherwise you don't have an understanding of this gam by Menashe. Zu noch mehr madgish sein, in order to emphasize as the Retzich wegen Megaten sein Kinder bis zu einem älteren Gil, that here we're discussing about raising children to an older age, nicht wie die Bnei Shileshim leEphraim, unlike the Bnei Shileshim, which were just babies. Is Rashi Moisef al Birke Yosef main Bein Birkov. In between was this main canal, the Gil and an älteren Gil, which means to raise them at an older age. So basically, even though it's another generation, but here it was for a long time, a longer period of time. And that's the chiddush of the Gam, that he was even able to raise them, not just to see them. And now the Rebbe is going to say that we can learn out halachas from these Pirush Rashi and the Targum. Well, von dem Posik Yulda Abirki Yosef, Saiki Pirush Targum Yenusim, Saiki Pirush Targum Unklus Rashi, whether it's like the Targum Yenusim, the Bris, or Pirush Targum Unklus and Rashi. Kemen Echar Islan in Yonim in Chelik Haloch Shebetorim. You can also learn a part in the Chelik, the part of Haloch and Torah Mehem. The Alter Rebbe sagt in Shulchan Aruch, the Alter Rebbe states in the Shulchan Aruch, As Tchilas Knesses Nefesh HaKadosh Beguf is B'Shas HaMilah. The beginning, when the holy soul, a child, when it enters the body, is at the time of the bris. As the far, uh, the one who's careful, Megis HaKotten, not touching a child, Yem HaMilah from Dibam Tilos Yadayim, Ve'elach Kodesh Yemer Lei, will say Kodesh because that's when the Kedusha goes into the child. If them din in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, on this din, that he says that not to touch is nit ongezeichnet, it's not noted. So being careful not to touch with before netilas yadayim, starting from the Yom HaMilah Ve'elach Kodesh Yom HaLoid, Alter Rebbe says. Uh, so if them din in Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch, so for this halacha in the Alter Rebbe Shulchan Aruch is nit ongezeichnet of Gillian. So on the sides of the Shulchan Aruch, it's not the reference der Mocker. What's the source? Amolot memevair given. The Rebbe says he explained already in the past in the Sichas Chelek Gimel. Sheyesh lema as the Mocker is in Sefer Seder Hayom. We can say that the source is in the Sefer Seder Hayom. V'lifnei b'Menoros Hamoyer, and even earlier than that in Menoros Hamoyer. Over there, the Rabbi Yisrael an Kavo, Bereshis Chochma. That what? Was Paskin Videdeya over there, he rules like the opinion. As cotton when does a minor come to Olam Habo from when he is circumcised? That's the opinion that the Alter Rebbe writes here, that not to touch from the day that from the Bismillah, not to touch him, not to defile without washing your hands. But based on the above, we can say das ist verbunden mit Agor Friedrich with a very earlier source. Targum Yonasan Hanalef Yulda al Birki Yosef. The Targum Yonasan, who translate Yulda Birki Yosef, Kas Isyalidu Gazirinun Yosef. That when they were born, Yosef did the circumcision. Come to us. As der Bris Gazirinun is der Zman von Isyalidu. That it turns out that when they were born, Yosef, when they were born, uh, was when Yosef Gazrinun, that is Yisalidu. So they were born. When is the considered their birth? When the bris takes place. L'cheire, there's man, habris, is taka besmiches to later. So Enochinami, that was before also, that the time of the bris is close to the time of birth. Aber nit kadis yalidu, it's not when they were born, it's still 8 days later. But Valpi Divri Admur Zakar is verstandig. But based on the Alter Rebbe's words that the Nefesh HaKadosh comes in by the bris, Demult is the Knesses Nefesh HaKadosh Beguf. Then is Kadis Yalid, the Nefesh HaKadosh comes into the body, but it's Dugmas later, it's born. The person is born, he gets his neshama, he gets the Nefesh HaKadosh. And that's why Kadis Yalidu, when he's born, meaning when the Nefesh HaKadosh comes in. That's the source, even from the Targum Yonasan ben Azil, that the bris is the time of birth. The Rebbe brings out another inyan of halacha. There's an issue about knowing a sandik You don't have by two children. But here it says, seems like Yosef was a sandik by both children. Uh, Bnei Mochir ben Menashe, he was sandik by both of them. Noch an inyan halacha was meken aroisnem von Tarig Yonasan. Another idea in halacha you can learn out in Tarig Yonasan. So Minig Yisrael, it's a Jewish tradition, am is only mechabed sein, demselben Menschen mit Tzadikois bei zwei Brüder. That you should not honor the same person with being a sandik by two brothers. If you were sandik by one brother, you don't do sandik other brother. Und der Tam der Fun, what's the reason for this? Mila wird verglichen zu Avodas HaKtodos. When you do the bris mila, it's similar to the service of the incense. By Ketores state, it's written with regards to Ketores in the Gemara in Yoma, "Ma'olam lo shona odom bo." A person never duplicated it. So you always had another person doing the Ketores, the offering, the bringing in the incense. You didn't do it with the same kohen, the incense that they brought in the Heichal, but the Mizbeach HaKtodos, you didn't have the same, everybody did it somewhere else. Since Bris is the Ktodos, so you don't have the same person do it again. Fragt man if them from them Targum Yonason. So the question is asked from the Targum Yonason. Steht doch as Bnei Mochir Gazrin Yosef, that the sons of Mochir, Yosef made the Bris Milah, as Yosef is given their sandik by Bnei Mochir, Lashon Rabbi, that he was the sandik by the sons of Mochir. It says a plural, Bnei Mochir. Same Yosef, he was the same person by two sons. V'yesh loymar, the Rebbe says, from them is asmach to divrach Sam Sofer, that this is also a lenient to the words that Sam Sofer says, as Amora de Asra, that a Rav of the city, Ken sein sandik by mehrere Kinder from the selbe Eltern, can be a sandik by many children of the same parents. Ubedugmas haktoris, because this is similar to the offering of the Ketores. Was der din von Chadoshim la Ketores. The idea that you need somebody new for the Ketores, as the Mishnah says in Yoima, is nor benegei andere Kahanim. This is when the other Kahanim do the Ketores. Aber nit b'shayches sa Kohen Gadol. But it doesn't apply to a Kohen Gadol. Kohen Gadol can bring in more than once. But so he can't make this Ketores when not gewollt. He was able to offer the incense whenever he wished. Balderich ze Yosef, similar to Yosef. Balder is given hashalit al haaretz. He was the master of the land. Bedugmas amor da asra, he was the master of the land. So this is what we learn from the words of Yonasan ben Azil. But the Rebbe says that we can also learn from Targum Onkelos and Rashi. So the Rebbe is going to continue now to learn in the halacha from Targum Onkelos and Pirush Rashi. Ches, from Targum Onkelos and Pirush Rashi. Can man uplearn from the Posik Adin in Hilchos Talmud Torah, we can learn a law in the laws of Talmud Torah. The Posik V'idaitom levanecha v'livnei vanecha. You should teach your sons and your sons' sons. Let them up achieve to learn the Torah. So from this we learn an obligation to teach Torah, not only with your son, but also when you're with your son's sons. So that's your grandson. What about a great grandson? Ben Benoy, the son of your son, an Ur Enikol, a grandson. Of it is the din. There is the halacha, as it is mechuyev mitzay learn nor in fall only obligated to learn them in a situation when it is a chochem, but he's mechuyev to learn mitalmidim when he's a sage and he's obligated to teach students b'chlal in generally. Was dan a great grandson dafer magdim zayin yotzei rechel tamid macherim, then he needs to proceed and teach his great grandchildren, his own descendants, before he teaches other students. But if in the city there are greater in wisdom than him, then he's not obligated to be the teacher of the students in general, let others teach her. He's from Elter Zayden on the great grandfather, there's no obligation to learn with your great grandchild. Leuten Targun, the Targun Onkelus von Pirush Rashi aber, but according to the Targum Pirush Rashi, as Yosef hat Megadol given, that Yosef raised the Bnei Mochid ben Menashe. So Yosef had a son, Menashe, and Menashe had a son, Mochir. And Yosef raised, who's the grandson of Yosef, the great grandchildren, Yuldu. Was the Pashas meant to. So what does it mean that he raised them? That he was learning Torah with his great grandchildren, with the sons of Machir. Is mashmanitazay. The Pashas is mashma. Simply is mashma. As Yosef is not given a chuyiv to learn mitamid b'chlal. He wasn't somebody who was has to learn with students. So it wasn't like a chochem, like we said, that's to do Yitzchak. But all of Yehuda dort gefirta yeshiva, it was Yehuda who was leading the yeshiva there. But Yehuda shalach goymer loyres fun of Goshna, he sent them ahead to Goshen. Usis mistaber, it's logical, as Yehuda was at the Ali Yorn on gefirta yeshiva, since Yehuda, all these years he was running a yeshiva, is given Godel b'chochem men, was probably greater in wisdom than Yosef. Beis. The Baldas Yosef is given Mishnah Lemelech, since Yosef was second to the king, he was busy with matters of the government for Eretz Mitzrayim of the land of Egypt, which included also taking care of Yaakov's family. He was occupied in a faithful way to his community occupation. He's a potter to learn Talmidim, is exempt from learning Talmidim. So why would Yosef go ahead and teach his great grandchildren? Why did Yosef himself teach Bnei Mochir? That's the sons of his son's son, Menashe's son Mochir's children. Zetman derfun, you see, as Rashi beperush al Torah halt, that Rashi in his commentary of the Torah is of the view as euch. If an elder Zayden is da chiyuv, that also on a great grandfather is an obligation to lernen Torah mit seiner Ur-Eniklach, to study Torah with his great grandchildren. Just as a grandfather with grandchildren, also with the great grandchildren. And the Riber had Yosef allein gelernt mit sei Torah. That's why Yosef himself learned Torah. That we learn from the Targum, Onkelos, and Rashi. That's from them what man lemaisa. From this, you also have a lesson in practical. As b'shas to the level ureniklach. When you have a privilege and you live to see great grandchildren, you should learn Torah with yourself. But if you yourself cannot learn with them, you don't have the strength, or that it is the tzunit mesugel, or you're not qualified, or similar. He has to give a big sum of money of Oiszahalten the yeshiva to support the yeshiva in welchen es lernen seine Ur-Eniklach, which is great grandchildren are studying. Ubefrat api Maimer Chazal, especially based on the saying of our sages, of blessed memory, Benegeya to Yaakovin, as relates to Yaakov. Mazare b'chaim, avu b'chaim. Yaakov doesn't say that he died because his children are alive. He's alive too. But Zare meint doch nit nor bonim b'bnei bonim. It says his children, his seed means not only sons and grandsons. No kol yitzchalotz of all descendants. Oich b'nei ben b'noi. Also the sons of his son's son, which is b'nei mochir ben menashe. Like by Afeton kola toli boy, he has to do everything that he is able to. There should be the true life. B'chaim, lernen Torah, to study Torah, euch, weil in dem besteht sein eigener Chayes. Afu b'chaim, this also consists your own life, because if you're seated and your great-grandchildren, your seed is alive, that's your life as well. This is Mesiches Shabbos Parshat Vayechi, Tavshin Chav Hei.